Hey, how's it going everyone? I'm Martin and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got some more Forsaken gameplay, this time showing off the new supers that are going to be coming, along with the abilities that the new subclass skill trees are going to offer. Obviously, if you don't want to see any new gameplay of like new areas and things like that, and you don't want anything spoiled, you may want to turn away from the video, but for the most part this is just showing off the new abilities of these new supers. Now, this gameplay does come from Game Informer, so I can't just use all of their footage. If you'd like to watch the full 8-minute gameplay with their commentary for yourself, link will be in the description. Now, real quick before I get into the new supers and such, I have some new information for you guys that came out with this week at Bungie. This was released just whilst I was editing this video, so I wanted to throw it in here. Now, along with the little update that we're going to be getting next Tuesday, Bungie have revealed that bounties are going to be returning to Destiny. We're going to be getting more Crucible bounties, more Vanguard bounties, and a couple others as well, according to this article. So here's what they had to say. They'll be obtained from a variety of vendors. They will generally award XP and faction reputation, though some will offer even better rewards. What these rewards are, we're not sure. Could just be like legendary engrams, potentially even exotics, that could be cool, and can be redeemed in the field to immediately claim your rewards. In Forsaken, you may also see some bounties drop in the wild. So that's going to be really interesting to see. I'm wondering if these bounties that drop in the wild are going to be just sort of like regular bounties that have been introduced with Forsaken, or if these are going to be any sort of special ones, you know, maybe they offer some kind of special reward. That'll be cool to see. Now, there are two new mechanics. Bounties will expire if uncompleted, and acquiring them will cost a small amount of glimmer. Bungie said, "We wanted to avoid the grab every bounty you see until your inventory is packed and sort them out later experience, without constraining players to the tiny inventory they found in previous iterations of the game." So unlike bounties back in Destiny 1, you can't just stock up on bounties and just complete them all in one go, they will expire. In Forsaken, more vendors will have more bounties on offer, and some will provide legendary or better rewards for completing them. So it sounds like potentially some of these bounties could offer exotics. Now, with the update coming next Tuesday, we've also been given some of the other changes. We'll get a full list of patch notes once, you know, the update is out, of course, next Tuesday, but we've got a couple other changes here that I want to go over. Firstly, with Escalation Protocol, weapon rewards chances to be more deterministic. This means that the more times you defeat an Escalation Protocol boss and don't get a reward, you have a high chance of getting a weapon on the next one. They're also going to be adding the ability to preview Sparrow contrails. You know how different Sparrows have different trails behind them? Well, now you can actually preview them, and you can also preview the spawn effects from your inventory. So you know how with your ship you can apply a spawn, you know, transmat effect. You can now preview that instead of having to apply it and only see it once you're in game. Additionally, the exotic catalyst for Sturm is also going to become available, and you can earn this simply by defeating enemies on Nessus, and I'm guessing it's just going to be a random drop. Now, this update is the same day as the Eater of Worlds Prestige mode is released. This is the 17th of July at 11 AM Pacific, which is actually an hour after the update drops, so that will give you an hour to download the update and get into the game and get ready for the Prestige version of Eater of Worlds. And then at 10 AM Pacific the next day, we're going to get in the Prestige version of the Spire of Stars. There are going to be a bunch of other minor changes coming with this update. We'll get the full patch notes on Tuesday, but for now, let's get back into the actual video. Starting with the Sentinel Titan, the new skill tree is called Code of the Commander, and the first perk on this is called Control to Demolition. This perk, when you damage enemies with void abilities, so with either your grenade or with your melee, it will plant what they're calling a detonator on that enemy. And what this can do is, you and your teammates can shoot that enemy, and it will fill up this detonator, it will fill up this void thing as if it was a bubble, and eventually that can pop and cause an explosion, damaging the enemy. But then that explosion can also spread to other nearby enemies, and you can do the same thing, fill it up, and cause those enemies to explode as well, and just kind of keep the chain going. So it's going to be a really good sort of area of effect attack, but it's also going to give you and your teammates kind of a target. It's also kind of a way of just marking an enemy, and that will give your teammates an idea of which target to shoot next. The next perk here is called Resupply, and this works in conjunction with Controlled Demolition. This perk, when you cause damage with the detonator, it will heal you and your allies and also grant extra grenade energy. And the other perk here is called Tactical Strike, and this means that your melee ability will cause a void explosion when hitting an enemy, but this can also set off nearby detonators, and then, as I said, these detonators can land on other enemies and spread to them and cause a big chain of explosions. As for the super, it's still kind of the same thing as the current Sentinels blocking ability, except instead of just a little shield for yourself, it puts up a massive shield that can protect your entire team, but what's better is that your teammates can also shoot through the shield. So I'm really excited to see what kind of applications this could be used for, because it seems like it could come in really handy and be sort of a potentially powerful tool for you and your team. Shooting through the shield can also extend the duration of the super, so it'll be really useful to have teammates behind you shooting through it because that'll keep the shield up for longer. Next up is the new skill tree for the striker. This is called Code of the Missile. The first ability here is called Ballistic Slam. This is your melee ability, and it's essentially a mini version of the Death from Above from Destiny 1. So to activate it, you'll first have to sprint to build up some speed, then jump up into the air, and then press the melee ability to come crashing down. Now this Ballistic Slam works in conjunction with the next perk here called Impact Conversion, and this perk means that you gain more super energy the more enemies you hit with your Ballistic Slam. And the third perk here is called Inertia Override. So when you kill those enemies with your Ballistic Slam, they'll of course drop some ammo. If you slide through that ammo after doing your slam, it will automatically reload the gun you're holding and increases its damage for a short time. And the super for this subclass, as I'm sure a lot of you may have seen by now in a lot of the trails and stuff, is called Thunder Crash, and this essentially just turns you into a flying missile. You can go soaring into the air and you actually have a lot of control as to where you'll land, and then just come crashing down with this Fist of Havoc. And then lastly for the Titan subclasses we have the Sunbreaker. This is called Code of the Devastator. The first perk here is called Throwing Hammer, and this is an interesting one because it replaces your melee ability, so you don't just have a regular punch. Instead, you get to actually throw your little hammer, you know, the Sunbreaker hammer that you always throw when you're in a super. You can actually throw that as if it was just your regular melee ability, kind of like how hunters have the throwing knives. You have a flaming hammer that you can just throw. So you essentially can just become Thor. You can throw the hammer, it will bounce off enemies and it will land on the ground, and then you can go and pick up the hammer. So if you run to the ground where your hammer dropped, you can just instantly pick up your hammer again and have your melee ability back and just throw the hammer again. I'm assuming if the hammer was to say fall off the map or something, it would just regenerate like a regular melee ability. But if it just drops on the ground, you can go and just pick it back up again. And doing this will also activate the next perk, Tireless Warrior, and this will cause your health regeneration to trigger instantly. And the other perk here is called Roaring Flames, and what this does is when you damage enemies with your hammer or any solo ability and retrieve it, it will actually increase your damage output, stacking up to 3 times. I'm not sure if this just means damage output for the hammer itself or for all of your weapons and abilities, but either way, that sounds pretty fun. I cannot actually wait to try this out. And the super for this subclass, as I'm sure you may have already seen already, is called Burning Maul. So instead of chucking a bunch of hammers like you normally do, you have one big hammer which is on a staff, and you can swing that thing around for momentum, and you can just go flying into battle. You can slam it down on the ground and that will cause sort of a line of fire to spread in front of you. It looks a lot of fun. I cannot wait to try this subclass out. Moving on to Warlocks now, starting with Dawnblade, your new skill tree is called Attunement of Grace. And the whole idea of this subclass essentially turns it into a support role. Right now Warlocks mainly have 2 options for helping teammates out, that's with the Empowering Rift or the Healing Rift. With the Attunement of Grace skill tree, this expands those options and gives you, more options to heal and empower your teammates. So the first perk here is called Divine Protection. This allows you to hold down the grenade button and turns your grenade into a blessing, which is essentially a health pickup for your allies that also grants overshields. So you can just kind of chuck this thing on the ground. The second perk here is called Guiding Flame. This is more of an aggressive ability. This empowers your allies after your melee ability connects with an enemy. So if you run up to them, punch them, it will then empower your teammates nearby and grant them, I guess, a damage boost. And the third perk here is called Benevolent Dawn. This can be triggered by either empowering or healing allies through things such as your Divine Protection, Guiding Flame, or either form of your rift, so the empowering or healing rift. Basically any of your perks will trigger this one, and what this perk does is it regenerates your melee, grenade and rift abilities, and based off this footage quite significantly as well. As for the super, it's called Well of Radiance, and this one looks pretty cool as well. So with this super, you slam down your sword into the ground, and this creates a little area for you and your allies that you can stand in, and this will both greatly heal and empower you and your teammates. so you can gain a lot of protection by this whilst also dealing a lot of damage. Do note it does not stack with your Rift ability, so you can't plant this super down and then also plant a Rift on top of it. It's not going to stack or anything, so that's just a way of preventing DPS from getting way out of hand. But regardless of that, it looks like it could be a pretty powerful super to use as well. Next up is Stormcaller. You have Attunement of Control. So with this first perk, when you kill enemies, sometimes you'll have a chance to drop something called Ionic Traces, and they look like these little arc flares on the floor. These traces will follow you and come to you and like they'll home in on you, and picking these up will refill your grenade, melee, rift and super energy when collected. So when you're playing with this subclass, it might be best to be sort of moving around the area, moving about the battlefield and picking up these traces, because these will refill your ability energy. Now if you happen to take damage whilst you're picking these little Ionic Traces up, that will activate the second perk here called Pulse Wave, and this will give you and your allies a speed boost. The third perk here is called Ball Lightning. This is your melee ability, but they didn't actually show this one, they only gave a text explanation of it. So from what I understand, it's a ranged melee attack and it produces a slow projectile that shoots out lightning. So from what I understand, this little ball will travel around really slowly and just sort of zap nearby enemies. I could be wrong on that, like I said, they didn't show any actual gameplay of it, they only gave a description. So that's just from what I understand. And then the super for this is called Chaos Reach, and with this you just release this massive beam of energy from your hand, like a big laser. The cool thing about this is that if you say run out of enemies to shoot with it and you've still got some super energy left that you don't want to go to waste, you can actually cancel the super and save that remaining bit of energy towards your next one. So if you wanted to, if you just wanted to use it against like a single enemy just for the fun of it, you can quickly flash it on, zap the enemy and then turn it off immediately and still have quite a bit of super energy left. And then lastly for Warlocks we have the Voidwalker, Attunement of Fission. So the first perk here is called Atomic Breach, and this is a ranged melee attack that creates a void explosion. The second perk on this essentially turns your grenade into a handheld Nova Bomb, so you can hold your grenade, consume it, and it will just explode in your hand and cause a little explosion around you. Damaging enemies with either of these perks, your melee or your grenade, this will activate the Dark Matter perk, which grants you a small amount of health and gives rift, melee and grenade energy in return. Causing damage with either of these perks, either your melee or your grenade, will activate the Dark Matter perk, which grants you a small amount of health and also gives you rift, melee and grenade energy. And then you have the super Nova Warp. With this you have two skills that you can use. You have the little teleport ability so you can get around the map quite quickly and sort of avoid enemy fire. And then you have the actual attack button that causes you to release an explosion around you. It's almost as if the Striker Titan was turned into a Void Warlock. You are essentially just a roaming Nova Bomb. You can teleport somewhere, cause an explosion, teleport out, cause another explosion somewhere else. It's pretty cool. And then lastly, moving on to Hunters here now, starting off with the Arc Strider, we have Way of the Current. The first perk on this is called the Tempest Strike. This is your melee ability, and now to activate this you need to slide before using it, and it's essentially the Hunter's version of a shoulder charge. So you slide, activate your Tempest Strike, and this will cause you to summon your staff for a brief second and causes you to send a wave of lightning in front of you, doing a lot of damage. But to activate this first, you need to slide. On top of doing a lot of damage, it can also sort of bounce your enemies into the air and stagger them a little bit. Now this perk synergizes with the other two perks here. The Ebb and Flow perk will electrify any target you use an arc ability on, and then punching those electrified targets will disorient them, as well as provide grenade, melee and dodge energy, so you can then build up your Tempest Strike again and unleash that on another enemy. But not only that, you then have the Lightning Weave perk, and this will increase your reload speed anytime you punch an enemy. So if you keep punching them whilst they're disoriented, it will then keep providing ability energy back and then also increase your reload speed. You can keep shooting, it works in this cycle, and it's going to keep you in the action a lot, keep you going a lot faster and having those abilities coming back to you really quickly. And then for the super, it's essentially still just kind of the same thing, except now you can twirl the staff around. It's called Whirlwind Guard, and this will allow you to deflect any attacks, any projectiles, and even bounce it back if you can sort of aim it right. And whilst it's not that much of a major upgrade for the super compared to other ones, it is going to be a really useful thing for Arc Striders, allowing you to close the gap a lot better, especially in PvP. Because the problem with Arc Striders right now is as soon as somebody sees you from a distance, they can easily gun you down, and Arc Striders don't really have much defense. So this is going to be a really good way to help close the gap, as I said, and also just provide protection in general. Next up, Gunslingers, your new skill tree is called the Way of 1,000 Cuts, and this one is one I'm particularly excited for as well. So the first perk is called Knife Trick, and this works with the super ability, which I'll get to in a second, but I'm sure you've seen it by now. This perk essentially lights enemies on fire, and whilst they're burning, you can then activate the Burning Edge perk, which will fill up your dodge, and Playing with Fire perk will then grant you energy for your Knife Trick if you manage to kill those burning enemies. The super, this is called Blade Barrage, and you throw just a flurry of flaming knives. Apparently it's actually based on how many enemies are in front of you from this video where they explained it. So if you say there's only one enemy in front of you, all the knives will kind of go towards that one enemy. However, if there's multiple in front of you, it will sort of try and evenly fan them out so you can get multiple targets at once. Now when you're in this super, it's a very sort of instant thing. You just activate it, it's one and done. But it does actually throw 2 sets of knives, it's just really fast. But if you're fast enough, if your sensitivity is set up high enough, you can actually throw 1 set of knives in front of you, spin around, and then throw the second set of knives behind you. And then lastly on the list here, we have for you Night Stalkers, Way of the Wraith. So the first perk here is called Flawless Execution. To activate this perk, you must have a precision kill whilst you're on full health, and this will grant you invisibility and True Sight. This lets you see enemies through walls. True Sight isn't a separate perk, it's a part of the Flawless Execution perk. If you then hit an enemy with your melee attack shortly after going invisible with the Flawless Execution perk, you'll weaken them with the Shattering Strike perk, reducing their damage output, so it kind of suppresses them in a way. And then lastly for your perks, you have the Corrosive Smoke Bomb. This melee ability explodes in a line, slowing down enemies from afar. And then the super for this is called Spectral Blades. You essentially turn into a void version of the Blade Dancer. When you activate this super, you go invisible, you can sneak up on your enemies, slash them, and then go back invisible again and then hunt after your next enemy. So this is going to be a lot more fun for people who like to be a lot more offensive. So those are all the new supers. Like I said, if you want to see the full video for yourself, there's a link to Game Informer's website, their video. I'm really looking forward to trying all these out, particularly the Knife Barrage for the Gunslinger Hunter, or the Code of the Missile for the Striker, and the new essentially Thor super, Code of the Devastator for Sunbreaker. That looks a lot of fun, just chucking a little hammer around. Let me know which supers you're looking forward to trying out the most. As always, I do hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.